So this is going to be an unfiltered thought process from me and kind of a personal recap for my session that I had yesterday. It's going to be completely unedited so that you guys can see my fully unfiltered thought process that I'm going to be going through during this. I have a few different notes, but we're going completely unscripted on this because I kind of wanted to give the impression of, hey, this is me reflecting on stuff without me properly scripting it and being like, so I'm basically just going to talk about my situation of a session that I had yesterday, what I found good about it, what I found bad about it, how I can improve, or what I'll continue to do in the future. And yeah, that's kind of what this is going to be about. Forgive a bit of a setup change here, but I changed a few things. I can now see myself over there, and my notes are now over here, so it's going to take a little bit of an adjustment, because even when I was doing this maybe like a year ago when quarantine was happening and I could only record in this space, I had a different setup, so I'm going to be getting used to this. But in any case, I did want to talk about. So the first thing was that we had a player missing for about an hour at the start, which luckily didn't actually impact things too badly in the grand scheme of things, because one, we never actually had a combat in that sort of space, and two, we were doing typical dungeon exploration, and that character themselves were good on the perception front, but other than that, didn't exactly have any sort of specific tools for dungeoneering that would have made that thing a lot more useful. So them being absent for the start of it was okay. It didn't make things too bad. I had ran it in sort of a way where they were present, they weren't exactly talking much, because I had NPCs around that were filling that void of a lack of conversation if the party isn't talking and stuff like that. So this guy, while being there and I was moving him and stuff like that, wasn't exactly engaging in the same way while the player was absent, as I think should happen. If a combat had happened, I didn't exactly have his stats up, but I played 22 sessions with this character at this point, so I know a few things about their kit and what they're likely to do, which is typically for this character run into corners and throw spells and be hidden and do not attract attention. And that's kind of what they did and what they continue to do in this whole adventure. So, to set up a little bit in terms of the adventure environment, they are currently in a sixth floor dungeon that I've been building for the past few weeks and had completed a few days ago. And I'd actually let my party know of this beforehand going into the session. Hey, I have the whole dungeon ready. And the main reason I said that was because each floor was very easy to navigate from the start and end of, with a bunch of space outside of it. So, for example, you could go 3 rooms and go all the way down to the next floor, but there are 7 or 8 outlying rooms with different things for them to find and explore. And the main reason I told them that is, hey, if you just want to go to the boss room when you find it, go for it. Just go down the stairs. And that was actually important later on, and I'll tell you why. Because there were 3 NPCs that they'd met at once. When I was constructing this adventure, I'd looked into the Dungeon Master's Guide on a few different things and ways that I could make it more interesting, and one thing is the adventure twist slash an additional element that can create more fun. And I had rolled on it, and I had come up with a rival adventure group going for the same thing. My party's going after this artifact called the Platinum Bangle, which is a relic of ancient goblin history and stuff like that. And this other group, the Order of the Emerald Claw, is doing the exact same thing, and that's where they intersect. Each of these 3 have their own independent motives within that, but their core motive is get the Platinum Bangle, which resulted in a very interesting team-up later on. So they had teamed up because this other group was completely rested. They had had a single combat encounter, and one of them had taken a bit of damage that was healed off. And that is all that they'd done, because they got into the dungeon after the party, and they had just walked through and gone the most direct route all the way down. And as they'd met, they were fine, and the party were very, very injured. They hadn't rested in a while, let alone like long rested. So they just kind of let the group go after a bit of a debate and just said, let's see if we can track them, because one element of the dungeon was that it was actually really, really wet, so a lot of like footprints and dirt were sticking, so they could actually be tracked and stuff like that in the dungeon. And that's kind of what they did. After they'd cut through, they'd gone the most direct route, because I felt like that's what this prepared group of adventurers who know the general layout would do, and the party had therefore taken it. They skipped 2 floors of my dungeon, and I'm not mad about it, because I had the others ready. And they have actually talked, that after the session they talked to me and they're like, yeah, we want to go back to those because we probably missed a lot. There's more treasure, there's more XP, there's more things to do and stuff like that. And they also have unfinished business on the surface as well. So there's plenty of them to do around that sort of area. They had a boss that had a small negotiation period that eventually got interrupted by said group trying to frame them, and it was a bit of a mess, honestly. But I think it was a good mess. I think that all of these conflicting NPCs talking and the players trying to control this hectic situation going on was quite fun, and especially since the absent player joined midway through and I had to give a quick recap and he was like, oh, that's what's happening. So after the whole fight, people had gone down. It was pretty rough because it was a Sahuagin Baron, which Sahuagin have the Blood Frenzy ability, which means they have advantage on attack rolls against any creature without all of their maximum hit points. And two party members had walked in and they were already damaged, which meant that he had good targets and focused on them. I play enemies as smart and cutthroat, so that my players have to adapt to that sort of scenario, and usually the first round or two of my combats are very lethal if you're not careful. So that's kind of what I went for. The Barbarian had charged right into the Sahuagin Baron before he had anything to do, but the Baron just ran to the side of him and went for the low health Paladin instead, taking that opportunity attack. He doesn't care, he wants to cause as much damage as possible. But eventually him and his lackey did go down, which I'd kind of added that lackey there as an extra safety net, because this was the hardest encounter in the dungeon, as the boss should be, in my opinion. And therefore it was, for a party of the equivalent of 5 level 5s, a deadly encounter if they were not prepared. However, they had plenty of options to kind of offset that. For one, they could simply just open the door, start running, but they'd taken the smart route and actually kind of used this extra group of adventurers as potential allies, because they did kind of share the same interests in a conflicted way. And it was me controlling 4 NPCs and 2 villain NPCs, and the party controlling 4 characters and stuff like that, which you might think, wow, that's going to be boring, but luckily my combat situations are very quick, so I don't think it was too bad. There were a couple of points where the players weren't really engaging as much, but that's fine because I was just rolling and making sure that all the numbers were going down. If I were to do it again, I think maybe I'd cut down that group to 2, which might also give the party more incentive to be a bit more direct with them, because it was 3 and they were looking fine, so it seemed like more of an even fight that they didn't exactly want to take if they wanted to challenge them. So after the fight, they'd had this whole argument about the bangle. The party had got it, and the rival party were debating on how they should have it, because they felt that it was more important that they had it, because every single person is very self-centered, and therefore they were like, no, we want it. Airplane. Ah. But there was one of these in the group of 3 whose motive was not, I want this bangle for whoever's hired me. He just wanted it because of the money, and was perfectly fine just being offered a bit of loot and helping out the party a bit in exchange for him helping them out. Like that's all it was. The 2 out of 3 of the party promptly left out of frustration, but this one guy called Vicwood stayed, and it was partly his choice. It was something that I feel like I didn't exactly force on the party, but I certainly made it so that it was the more optimal choice to kind of bring him along, since he seemed eager to help. And sorry, I've got a bit of a stotty doze right now. But yeah, I'll talk about more how I ran him in a sec, because I was at that point still running 2 NPCs that were going along with the party. One that they brought with them on the adventure, purely roleplay stuff and wanting to be more safe. They had an allied NPC that they wanted to bring with them, and one party member got a 25 on a persuasion, so I'm like, well, I guess they're coming. So they went down to the last floor, which I had kind of set up as this is the only place that this Sahuagin army has not actually explored, because if they go down there, they usually don't come back up, so they've just left it. They had a very close call with a clay golem, which, a CR9 creature against 4 level 5 party members, you might think I'm a bit insane, but I had set this up in a way where they could creatively use the environment to try and take this thing down. I had put a glimmering magical chandelier right above it that they could use to do a buttload of magical damage to it. And the party didn't pick up on the bait because I don't think they thought it was magical. I think the reason that they didn't is because I personally know that I described it as something slightly supernatural or magical or something like that, because all of them were working with dark vision. None of the party needed lights, and I mentioned that it was strangely sparkling despite an absence of light in the area, which wasn't enough apparently. I think that I should have also mentioned you might think it has something magical about it, and then that might have prompted them to think, okay, we can kill this clay golem with this, and they were in pretty dire straits because they had done the boss fight and only really short rested. Some of the party members didn't even have all their hit dice to spend, and they'd spent them like all before, so they were still pretty low and stuff. And it didn't go so well. There were a lot of risky things going on, but luckily they did outnumber it 6-1, and with enough spellcasting tools and that Vicwood guy, the NPC, using the chandelier eventually after taking 2 rounds to think about it, because I really wanted my players to do that, but I figured, hey, if there's anyone going to do it, Vicwood's experience, he's going to do it. And it kind of swung on it and shattered it down on its head. And I thought that was pretty cool, but I would have preferred my party to do it, honestly. And next time I gotta make it look more magical. This was also actually an encounter triggered by a party member walking past this statue that I had described previously. And I think that they weren't careful about it, because I don't know if the player was properly listening to that description, because they themselves weren't around the corner seeing it. Which I think is a sort of thing that any player will fall into, because they're like, oh, nope, my character isn't there, so I'm not going to pay attention to this. Even though you really should, because 1, the DM doesn't want to explain themselves again, and then 2, that might end up with you, say, triggering a clay golem by walking past it. In any case, right after that, they immediately went to long rest, which was a smart move. And I've been, the past few sessions, trying to very actively bring on some more in-depth roleplay conversations beyond just let's talk about the adventure. So, for example, Vicwood was a vessel for one of the player characters to talk about their relationship with another one by asking about it, because he was a very curious guy. And I do think I made Vicwood talk too much in his introductory session, basically. Which, I think, if you're introducing an NPC, they should be talking more than they usually would in that first session or 2, if you plan to keep them around. But Vicwood was talking more than some of the player characters, and I think that is absolutely a no-go for me. He was stealing the thunder way too much, and next time I'm going to try and rein him in. I got used to it with the other NPC that they have around. She's called Mealy, and she is not exactly an adventurer. She's an underpowered in comparison to the rest. She's a spellcaster with a very limited set of spells and that are really not useful for the whole adventuring thing. She has the least hit points, the least AC, and the least options. And she's more so to be protected rather than a super useful tool, except occasionally. She does some cool stuff, but she's mostly just around as kind of I don't know what's going on. But Vicwood, since I built him with the possibility of the party fighting him, is a lot stronger, but passively. I gave him a heavy armor master feat, but for all damage, so everything's reduced by 3 to keep things simple for myself, but have a really powerful feature still. 2 attack, multi-attack with a greatsword, so he's consistently going to be doing something. And of course Fey Ancestry, so he's harder to charm and stuff like that, because he was a half-elf. That whole adventuring group that he rocked up with was. And I think that whole conversation with Vicwood did engage one of the player characters to talk about their relationship with another, and they were talking about the future and how this relationship would kind of impact it. And I think that built on their perspective of the game and the other player's perspective on that character, and I think it was really worth it to get that whole discussion going. Because I'm a fan of, in D&D, not talking about the adventure sometimes, especially as a player. I will bring up, hey, you guys want to play Dragon Chess, or hey, you want to dance, or hey, you want to talk about feelings? Like, I'm that sort of player, and I think that brings out things in other players as well, which is why I try and do it through my NPCs as a DM as well. So, I mentioned earlier that I had all 6 floors of this dungeon mapped out. It's about 60 to 70 rooms. Some aren't as substantial as others, of course, as it's going to be. And I have never been this ready in D&D in my entire life. I am usually really bad with this stuff. I have improvised entire dungeons and not even had the maps on like the Roll20 program that I use, and I've just been like, yeah, there's a hallway, and then there's a door to the right and a door to the front. They're red. You want to... But I had everything planned out, and I still do, and my party are going to be in this place for a few more sessions, because even though they found the main treasure hoard, they still know there's a lot left to find, there's more encounters to be had, and they're still missing out on a load of stuff that I've made, and I think that that's partly the reason that my players want to go back. Not just to, I want to explore the dungeon, but it's also, hey, Jake's made all this stuff, maybe we should go explore it, which I think I appreciate, because it's kind of the unwritten DM and player contract of the DM has stuff ready, we should probably go and do that, and my players have gotten good at doing that, so I appreciate them. In any case, that is that. I did evaluate some stuff that I didn't do well and then also did do well. If there's anything you think that you have an opinion on of what I've done, then let me know. Next session's going to be a load of dungeon exploration, and perhaps you guys can, I don't know, give me advice? I don't know, this whole campaign diary-esque series that I might be starting up isn't exactly going to be me giving a load of advice. It's more so an evaluation so that you don't make the same mistakes as me, or you take on some things that I've done and I found personally effective with my group. Your group is going to be entirely different to mine, so don't let my advice be gospel or anything. In any case, if you found this at all useful, give me all the likes and the subscribes and stuff. I haven't really been making very many videos recently, and it's purely just been laziness, I will admit. I've had things going on, of course, yeah, everyone does, but it's been no excuse. I've still had plenty of time to do a video. Like, these things take apparently 16 minutes and 38 seconds, so it's not too bad, and it took like 2 minutes to write up a bunch of bullet points. That's it. If you guys want to see more of this sort of stuff, evaluating how I played a session out and stuff like that, let me know, because I think some of the advice in this is useful, even if it wasn't really exactly, you should be doing this, because I really don't like that sort of advice. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'm going to manually hit stop recording now, because again, not editing this.